All right, it's a live episode of Locked On Pelicans as the Pels have fired David Griffin. I'll tell you exactly where things went wrong in his tenure, what the future is going to be for Willie Green, what the future should be for Willie Green, and we're going to look at Zion Williamson's future here in New Orleans as well. There is a lot to unpack from the day's big news. Let's break down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter. Here with you live on Monday afternoon, evening, after the Pelicans have fired David Griffin. We got a lot to put in this in terms of context around this firing. Where did it go wrong? Was there a big mistake there? Where does Zion fall in terms of the blame when it comes to it? We're going to cover it all, including touching briefly on Joe Dumars in today's live episode of Locked On Pelicans here. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. It is going to be a big offseason for New Orleans. So we are going to cover everything you want to know about it here. So since we're doing a live show, the way I do this is I'm going to get through my normal show. It's 3 segments. We got a lot to cover with David Griffin, Willie Green, and Zion Williamson. Put your questions in the chat. Put your comments in the chat. Please don't spam the chat. It's just easier to ban you from the channel than it is to deal with lots of moderation. So let's not do that. And then we'll do a bonus segment at the end for as long as I can. I got a radio spot at 6:35 on WWL radio that we will end kind of a few minutes before that. So let's get into it here. The big news is David Griffin fired by the New Orleans Pelicans. And I want to put this in context here, that if you're looking at David Griffin, his tenure has been a little bit mixed. It's been both good and bad here. But ultimately, his biggest failure, and this might not be directly his fault, his biggest failure is he never made the Zion Williamson era work. Hold that thought for a minute, right? Look, a lot of that era not working, this current era not working, is on Zion Williamson himself. But David Griffin is also not blameless. There were a lot of mistakes made. And look, every front office doesn't have a perfect track record, but the decision to go sign and trade for Devontae Graham and then using 4 second-round picks to get off of that bad deal in the first place after using a first-round pick to get him doesn't look good. They took too long to trade Brandon Ingram, lost value from him in that, and trying to force a fit that just wasn't there between Ingram and Zion. And while they got as good of a return as you could get for Brandon Ingram as this season went on, you could have gotten more in the past, and so it's a bit of a mismanagement of assets there. And look, even giving up on Dyson Daniels in the DeJounte Murray trade, which is still defensible at the time, look at how he's blossomed. So you look at that, and it hasn't come together. And when you look at the roster around Zion Williamson, a center has just never been acquired. And that's not true, as I've said this repeatedly. They have tried for like every center you would think they should try for. Jared Allen, Miles Turner. They've come close at least twice, very close to trading for Jared Allen, like where you just need a little bit to get that over the line. But your job as the lead basketball decision maker, GM, vice president of basketball operations, whatever the title is, it doesn't matter. Lead basketball decision maker. Your job is to get that deal over the line. And he was just never able to do that. And all of that kind of overshadows some of the good drafting. And they've done a really good job of drafting. I want you to remember that for tomorrow's show. When you look at them drafting Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, even the undrafted guys, they've done a very good job. And regardless of the injuries, which is what really derailed this season, and David Griffin is a bit of a victim of Zion missing more games than he's played. And he is here. Regardless of player availability, it's always going to come down to the front office taking the fall. This is a results-oriented business, and the results just haven't been good. It's really as simple as that. So I want to look at this part with it too. We can point to the on-the-court moves, right? The players, the roster, the injuries, and all of that here. And as I said earlier in this part right now, most of the failure of this era to me is on Zion Williamson, his lack of professionalism at times, just not being who they needed him to be, and the injuries that have happened. And those injuries are kind of, at times, self-inflicted by Zion himself, and sometimes it's just rotten luck, which is a factor into it too. But a big part of Griffin's tenure here and never making the Zion Williamson era work is Griff and the team didn't get off to the best start with Zion, did they? At all, right? Remember the bubble, the piano story, and all of that stuff. They just didn't get off to the right start with Zion Williamson and instill that professionalism in him or put the infrastructure in place around to force that to happen. And that has set everything back in this era. And while Zion needs to own his part of this, and I'll certainly be criticizing him in the next couple of days, part of a lead executive's job is to simply just make it work. You got to make it work. And if you don't connect with your best player or what have you, that's a failure on that executive, that person doing it. It's a failure on Zion Williamson himself too, but there's blame to go around with that sort of thing. And so while Zion is massively to blame for it too, it's on Griff as well. And here's what I've often said, and this is maybe Griff's biggest fault for this era and why he got fired. And that's, I've long said that if I were in charge, I would go down with the Zion Williamson ship. I'd keep believing in this guy, I'd keep trying to make it work. That approach didn't work. Let's try something else. Okay, that didn't work. Next season, let's do this, right? Multiple head coaches, multiple different types of players around him, giving him leeway, giving him not, all of those things. The dude is so talented as a player that I think you've got to try and make it work. And if it doesn't, you get fired, and that's that. So I've long said if I were in charge, I'd go down with the Zion ship. And it looks like Griff went down with the Zion ship. And it's really that simple. So even if Griff is blamed, so one thing I want to get into with this is ownership too, right? Even if Griff is blameless, and he's not, but let's just use it for the argument that he is. Even if he's blameless in all of this, ownership had to make this decision. Ownership, and I use that as kind of a catch-all term for Gail Benson and the people that are her lieutenants, her trusted advisors, right? Ownership had to make this decision because inaction or just simply running it back would have been kind of an insane thing to do and would have sent the message to fans that ownership doesn't care and that failure is tolerated. So in one sense of this, it's nice that ownership seems to have gotten the message that they just couldn't continue down this path. We're going to look at ownership heavily in tomorrow's show. I don't want to focus on that too much today. Let's just kind of take the reaction and everything that happened. But I'm going to look heavily at ownership and Joe Dumars in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. You are not going to want to miss that. If you haven't seen me heated before, you're going to see me heated in that episode. So, look, as for who's going to replace Griffin, the name to keep in mind is Joe Dumars. I wrote my notes for my show when the news broke here. And what I'd said was, literally, I'll read you verbatim what I have written down. Quote, as for who will replace Griffin, it's likely they hire a consultant to help make a short list, but as always, keep the name Joe Dumars in mind, end quote. That was well before Shams reported that Joe Dumars is the heavy frontrunner or whatever the word was. Dumars has connections to the state of Louisiana, being from Shreveport. He's held in high regard and friendly with ownership. So after the failure of the Griffin era and David Griffin kind of being an outsider, ownership's kind of doing the pendulum swing thing where you go the opposite direction. They're taking someone familiar to them, someone they kind of trust. And that could be Joe Dumars. Joe Dumars did win a ring in 2004 running the Pistons, but the end of his tenure was not great. We're going to look more at Joe Dumars tomorrow. But what about Willie Green? As of now, he's the Pelicans head coach. But is that going to be there? And what should the decision on Willie Green be? Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Hungry Root. Spring is here and life is busier than ever. It really is. Between work, family, everything in between, who has time for grocery shopping and meal prep? And that's why I love Hungry Root. It makes eating healthy, delicious meals simple and stress-free. So Hungry Root is like having your own personal shopper and nutritionist wrapped in one. They take care of grocery shopping and meal planning, offering personalized recommendations based on your tastes and health goals. I love how Hungry Root tailors my orders based on what I like or don't like. and it gets smarter every single time. And with their high quality, nutritious food, you can stick to your gut friendly, high protein diet or whatever it is without spending hours planning, which I don't have time to do. And the meals come together in 15 minutes or less, giving you more time for your workouts, to spend time with your family, to watch Locked On Pelicans or your other hobbies. So take advantage of this exclusive deal. Get 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA for 40% off and a lifetime free item. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And by the way, for all the live listeners here, I appreciate y'all tuning in and sticking with me. The chat's being awesome right now. You guys are fantastic. Do you know about the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter in your inbox? One stop for ultimate team and league coverage. So look, David Griffin firing, the future is up for grabs with Willie Green, the draft is around the corner, then free agency. There's a lot going on. So subscribe to the Locked On Pelicans newsletter to keep up with it all. But also, you could win big by subscribing. Subscribe between April 7th, which is already past 2025, and April 30th, 2025 for your chance to win one of these amazing prizes. A $2,500 gift card to upgrade your viewing experience, $300 to Game Time to buy tickets, $200 to Fanatics, maybe for a jersey of Cooper Flag, hopefully. So get exclusive insights into free agency, draft, and team updates delivered straight to your inbox. Go to LockedOnDaily.com and just click on the Locked On Pelicans logo to subscribe, and you have a chance to win. Go do it right now if you're watching the show. It's a great way to support us. We don't ask for money or anything like that. Just support it by watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing to the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. So Willie Green. Notice that today they fired David Griffin. They did not fire Willie Green. And if you are an everydayer, that means you listen every day to Locked On Pelicans. Let me know if you're an everydayer in the chat. I'm looking at it here. I appreciate y'all so much for interacting and watching with me here. They fired David Griffin. They did not fire Willie Green. The past couple days, I've been talking about alignment with the front office and coaching staff. And one of the things that I'm terrified of happening here, and it might happen, is that they get that out of alignment. Your front office and head coach need to be aligned. Look at the Denver Nuggets. Look at the Memphis Grizzlies. Those are a bit of disaster situations right now. And that's because the front office and head coach were butting heads and not in alignment. If you fire David Griffin, hire anyone to replace him, and force them to keep Willie Green, they're not going to want Willie Green. They're not going to want Willie Green. These GMs, these vice presidents of basketball operations, they want to pick their own guy. So if you are bringing someone in, forcing them to inherit Willie Green, we're going through what we did at the beginning of the David Griffin tenure, where he was forced to inherit Alvin Gentry, didn't want him, and then fired him in a year, and it basically wasted a year. It wasted a year of kind of building the program, building the franchise in the way that you would want. I don't want a repeat of that. I don't want a repeat of that at all. So by not firing Willie Green today, you are in theory, I'll tell you in a second, letting the David Griffin replacement make that decision on Willie Green, and they should be allowed to make that decision. There should not be a mandate from ownership in any capacity here. Ownership, again, that's a catch-all term for a number of people, absolutely, unequivocally, needs to stay out of the process with the head coach. We'll see if they do. Right? I don't want to use the term unserious franchise or whatever because, look, they're all serious. They are. But forcing your next person to keep Willie Green, if that's not the right head coach for the team, is a meddling move that the only thing it accomplishes is setting you back by trying to be nice to a guy that you like. Look, I don't care about nice or not nice. I care about winning. That's all that matters. Yeah, try and do right by people, but the organizational health, the franchise needs to come first. And if you're making a decision based, well, he's a nice guy, so we're going to keep him, that is the wrong decision. Look, maybe your next person keeps him. Maybe they don't, but that would be the wrong decision otherwise. It needs to not be an ownership decision on Willie Green. It needs to be your next lead basketball decision maker's decision here. And the reporting, Schmidt Duo, who's a friend of mine, very trustworthy on this, says he thinks that it's going to be a mandate. I have heard that as well, that they are keeping Willie Green here of, whoever they potentially hire. That is an incorrect decision. And while I don't think ownership of this team is one of the worst in the league at all, they have invested in resources and things like that. This would be a dumb move. Look, maybe you keep Willie Green if that's truly what the next person wants. I'm fine with that, even if I'm not the biggest Willie Green fan. But at least they need to have the autonomy to make that decision. And it doesn't seem like that's what's going to happen here. And that's the type of decision-making process that massively concerns me on so many levels and would be a step back for this franchise. So I'm not saying they have to fire Willie Green. I want to be clear on that. But the right person needs to make that determination, needs to make that decision, and not ownership. So firing David Griffin today, not doing anything on Willie Green, that works for me. But it shouldn't just be no matter what, Willie Green is set with the job. The other thing to keep in mind with this is Willie Green has one more year on his contract, so next season. Say they somehow contend next year, make the playoffs for whatever, around Zion or not, right? They then would be in position where you have to retain Willie Green going forward. You're going to have to give him a new contract. If he makes the playoffs, you can't be like, we're just going to let him walk, right? And at that point, if you go into next season with him on an expiring deal, Willie Green, and he makes the playoffs, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, say he does, then you are going to have to overpay Willie Green too. And I've seen a lot of people scream, Michael Malone, Taylor Jenkins, or even Bob Myers from the front office position. Look, my biggest criticism when it comes to ownership is not that they don't want to spend. They spend when they need to. But they're not going to spend that much on a head coach or a front office person. You want Michael Malone, that's $10 million a year, right? They're not going to pay that, I think. And so with Willie Green, you're going to feel comfortable paying Willie Green $6, $7, $8 million per year. If he makes the playoffs next year, that's what you're going to have to pay him. And then you're stuck with him for a while because you're not going to just fire him and eat that money if that's not the right thing. So that does massively concern me. So look, right now, retaining Willie Green, I would call his future uncertain. In a technical sense, I don't think is an incorrect thing to do. Let that next person make that decision. But that's only if you're going to actually let that next person make that decision. And I am very concerned that that's not what's going to happen with this team and that ownership will meddle a little bit because of feelings around Willie Green or whatever. That's not how you win. That's not how you should run a franchise whatsoever. And these are the type of moves that would make me really kind of turn against ownership. As I've said before, I don't like to get too much into ownership when it comes to this. They're not selling, right? Gail Benson is not selling the team. So being like, we're not, if she doesn't sell this as an unserious franchise, it is what it is. And you need to accept that, in my opinion, as like a fan of this team, right? It's just kind of part and parcel with it. That's not going to change. So we're going to look at every decision kind of through the lens of that. If I just tell you don't pay attention unless Gail Benson sells the team, then you're just never going to pay attention, right? And that's not what any of us want. So that doesn't really accomplish anything here. So we got to look at every decision through that lens of ownership's not changing. There's limitations there. And we just have to accept it even if it's unfun. And that's what this is. But they should, under no circumstances, be meddling with the coaching decision. That needs to be owned by whoever replaces David Griffin, Joe Dumars or anybody else. And if you're forcing decisions on that, the process is broken here because one of the things the everydayers know this that I've said is you need to have a clear direction for your franchise going forward. Whoever is in charge, your lead basketball decision maker, needs to have a clear vision for this team, and they need to be able to go out and execute it and follow through on that and have the trust of ownership, the freedom, the autonomy to do those sorts of things. Otherwise, you're trying to go here, but then you got to go this way, and then you got to go this way. None of that works towards building a coherent winner. You need to have a vision and go forward with it. Through the bumps in the road, the ups and downs, keep going forward on executing the vision. If you hire someone who has a vision for the team, and then you go, but you can't fire the head coach, you got to keep him. That's not letting them execute their vision, and that means you're not going anywhere, and you're going to be stuck. And that's not an okay position for this franchise to be in whatsoever. So we'll look more at Joe Dumars in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. I'm going to come in hot. I might even record it after this, so it's just ready to go. What we're recording right now, what you're watching right now, is technically the Tuesday show. So that would be Wednesday's show that'll be released, early Tuesday night when all of that. So Willie Green could be next, could not be next, regardless of whether he should be fired or not. And honestly, they should probably let him go and go with an entirely new direction on all of this. It needs to be led by the next lead basketball decision maker. It doesn't sound like that's going to be the case from what I've been hearing, but we'll see. And we'll approach it when a decision gets made here. But this is the type of direction that is actively concerning me about the direction of this team for the first time in a while. So speaking of direction with the team, does Zion Williamson have a future in New Orleans? I got a couple of things to say about that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by OpenPhone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. And when you think about it, when was the last time you had a service emergency? If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. And that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications all through an app on your phone or computer. I love that if you're a business owner, you don't need to carry 2 cell phones. That's annoying. Those guys always annoy you, right? With OpenPhone, you can manage your business calls and texts from one app, whether you're at your desk or on the go. One of the features that I love about this is the shared inbox. Your team can jump into any conversation without missing a beat. And they have AI call transcripts and summaries, which save you time on follow-ups, ensure you never lose track of customer interaction. So OpenPhone is offering Locked On Pelicans listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you're switching from another service, OpenPhone will even port your existing numbers over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. And if you're an everydayer, you're watching live right now, let me know in the comments. I'm seeing them here all on the side on YouTube. I love doing these live shows. I wanted to get this out to you as quick as possible. Could have recorded it ahead of time, edited it, then uploaded it. But let's just do it live in the moment here so we can get the instant reaction. Not even make you wait 30 more minutes for my take on the David Griffin firing. So look, David Griffin firing makes sense. I think they should have done that, truthfully. Ownership needed to send a message that this isn't okay. And then they've started to send the wrong message. More on that in tomorrow's episode of Locked On Pelicans. By the way, your second listen today, Locked On Saints. What is going on with that Derek Carr injury? Ross Jackson of the Locked On Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, is making sense of everything black and gold. Go subscribe to Locked On Saints wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Make them your second listen today. So let's look at Zion Williamson. We have seen David Griffin is fired. The future is uncertain for Willie Green. And the future seems like it's uncertain for Zion Williamson. I want to go to something from a couple of years ago that I talked about here. And Shamit Dua put this out there today of like, they're kind of fed up. Ownership is basically fed up with Zion Williamson, and the latest off-court drama around him is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back, to use a phrase here with all of this, okay? I went back a couple of years ago. I got flamed for this too. When he first had the Mariah Mills drama, and we're not going to go into details on this, and I said, Gail Benson's not going to like that. I said, Gail Benson, this is like 2-3 years old at this point, right? I said, Gail Benson is not going to like that. I don't really want to pat myself on the back too much on this one, but I told y'all that was going to be a problem. The off-court drama is going to be a problem for ownership on this team. And you could say it's hypocritical. You can say whatever. It doesn't matter. They don't like it. Whether they should not care or whatever, doesn't matter. I got flamed for that, being like, well, ownership's going to be mad he had sex. They're going to be mad at the drama unfolding like this, especially with his lack of playing, right? And it's like, where are your priorities when it comes to this sort of thing? And that has been a problem for this organization for a while. It goes back to what we said in the first segment of The biggest failure on David Griffin's part was this team and him did not get off to the best start with Zion Williamson. And could you have avoided some of this? Could you have avoided some of the injuries by getting him into the right place and becoming the professional he needs to be? A lot of that is on Zion too, don't get me wrong. But they're kind of fed up with that kind of stuff right now. And it feels like maybe they just want to move on from this era. And maybe that's not the correct thing to do from a talent perspective, and it's probably not. But I'll ask you this. A question to y'all. You can answer if you want or use it as a rhetorical question. Has this been fun? Has this been fun for you? Has this era of Pelicans basketball been fun? Or has it been a roller coaster that's driving you nuts? Right? Even if he is so talented, can they keep going this way? Can they keep doing this? And the answer just has felt like no. You can't do it. That's why they needed to take as dramatic of a step today with David Griffin as they have, because you just can't keep doing it the way that you've been doing it. And so with Zion Williamson, I think there's just a level of that. Look, if he was playing, you can put up with this stuff. But if he's not playing, then I don't know. And I think that's going to be something that they really need to, that they're going to evaluate of just, is this a tenable situation? I'm taking off socks because it's hot in this room because I'm talking so much and the light's on me, all that. That's a problem. But if you trade him, you're not going to be competitive. This team thinks they can be competitive next season without Zion Williamson. Like, good luck. Good luck. And we're going to not be kind to the franchise here on Locked On Pelicans, right? Like, that's at all not going to be it. So, they need to really kind of determine what they want for this franchise and what they can be. And again, it kind of goes to pick a direction and go with it. If you trade Zion, you're going through a rebuild. You're going to go through a rebuild that is going to ultimately end up with you trading Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, or at least it should if you want to do it properly. As unfun as that sounds, how bad is that team going to be in the future for the next 5 years? Pretty bad. Pretty bad. That's what we're looking at here with this franchise, depending on the direction that they go with this sort of thing. So that's not great. That's not a great position to be in. And the Pelicans need to, in a sense, tread pretty carefully going forward. And that's why when we get into tomorrow's show, talking about Joe Dumars and ownership's role in all of this, why I am actually very concerned. I was on with Matt Moscona on ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge earlier today. If you didn't listen live, go find it. It's online somewhere. It's probably on YouTube. It's probably posted on Twitter and all that. You're going to want to hear that, because I keep saying this, I'm coming in hot, because you can see the red flags are just being waved in our faces right now. This is the most I've ever been concerned over this franchise. I get the failures and other things before, and I have long said, one of the conclusions that I've arrived to this year from talking to people around the league and things like that is, look, it's just hard to build a consistent winner. It's just very hard to build a consistent winner, and you need a lot of luck, and you need that luck up front when you're kind of starting your contention. The Warriors getting Steph Curry on that cheaper contract because of the injuries he's had, and then he became the player that he did, that's somewhat luck, right? And it allowed them to add a Kevin Durant that they wouldn't have been able to add if Steph Curry had just been good from the start. And that allowed them to kind of sustain a different era and become the team that they thought they could be, right? Or that they did become. That's luck when it comes to some of these things. The Pelicans have not had that luck. But you also need to make smart decisions around it. You can have the luck and screw it up. You can have the luck and screw it up. Look, you could argue this franchise has done that, right? But what you can't do is make bad and or short-sighted decisions or just dumb decisions in the first place. And so all of a sudden now I am worried about the Pelicans' ownership decision-making process. When you looked at them hiring David Griffin, you could call that, a kind of a message to the rest of the league. They managed to get David Griffin, who was, 2-3 years off of winning a title, and in a really good spot to try and kind of rebuild this franchise. A guy that, had a lot of suitors around the league, and they aggressively pursued him. They aggressively paid to bring in guys like Trajan Langdon and others to kind of build up this team and build a very good front office. Are they going to do that again, or are they kind of swinging the opposite direction with the pendulum? And that's the type of thing that concerns me here. So while David Griffin was not perfect. He's just had a lot of bad luck. Same with Willie Green too. And that bad luck has kind of been around Zion Williamson when it comes to it. So those are the concerns I have. And I want to get into those more tomorrow and why. And we're going to kind of spend the whole show focused on that sort of thing. But I wanted to get the kind of initial reaction today, the big questions around the team right now. And there's going to be more. There's more to come in the future that's going to start to come out in the next day or two as well. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to cover. So we're going to be answering all the questions you want to know about here on Locked On Pelicans. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. So here's what we're going to do. We're ending this portion of the show. I got probably about 10, 20 minutes that we can do to answer your questions in the chat. So I'm going to hit the outro video, stick with it. And then I'm going to start to be more interactive. I'm looking at the chat right now. I'll start answering your questions here. But at least this allows me to kind of get this up and everything. So hear me end the show, but stick with me here. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter. More on Zion Williamson and Joe Dumars and ownership tomorrow, because I have big concerns that I want to look at with that. And trust me, you're going to see a different Jake in that show here. So as always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Stick with me here for a moment. All right, we're back. It's almost Locked On Pelicans After Dark here. Normally, we're doing these kind of late when I do these live shows, but the news is so big today. So I'll get to your questions here in the chat. If you've got them, put them in the chat. Be nice. Don't spam the chat. I've been looking at it. Everyone's been awesome here, and I appreciate y'all hanging out with me. We'll go do this until I got to do the radio spot on WWL radio. When this ends, put on 870 AM if you're in New Orleans or anywhere near it, and we'll kind of get to everything here. So I'm going to start going through the chat a little bit. Let's go with Mike Garcia. Go get Bob Myers. He's better than Joe Dumars. I mean, I'm not a Joe Dumars guy. And look, if they end up hiring Joe Dumars, and this whole show is going to be about it tomorrow, I hope he succeeds. And I'm going to be rooting for Joe Dumars. Not thrilled with the hire, but look, that decision will have been made, and you've got to support it in hopes that it would go well. My big thing with hiring Joe Dumars, and this is going to be the crux of tomorrow's show, is why are you making a decision right now without at least casting a wide net or going through an interview process and going through the proper course of what you should be doing? And that's kind of the big concern when it comes to that, right? So that's kind of the big concern. I'm him says Antonio Daniels is our next head coach. Watch. I've actually talked to him about that. Antonio Daniels is a friend of the show. He has no interest in coaching. He loves his job, and not like the way that head coaching job makes you age like crazy, right? He wants no part of that. He's still going to be on there. The Aaron Braden show says, love you, Jake. Thank you. Appreciate you and everyone just tuning in and making Locked On Pelicans part of your day. Or if you're just tuning in because of the big news, you want updates on it, we got you covered here. That's cool. Hope you stick around for other episodes, or at least subscribe to the Locked On Pelicans newsletter over at LockedOnDaily.com. Win those prizes. That will mean you get Locked On Pelicans in your inbox every single day. So let's keep going through here with some of these comments. Mo Better says, we need a younger, more progressive GM. You can't build a team the way Joe Dumars did with the Pistons 20 years ago. No, you can't. And the end of his tenure there was really, really bad. Really, really bad. We're going to go more into that in tomorrow. Look, he doesn't scout. His draft approach is really bad. Now, look, doesn't mean that people can't change, can't grow, can't get better. He's still around the league. It's not like he's been completely removed from everything, but I don't love the idea of Joe Dumars. Hugh Beef says Willie Green should have been gone last year. Maybe, maybe not. Look, I think there's pros for keeping him. He's been dealt a bad hand, but results have to matter, and you've definitely seen some problems with his process with that. Mike Garcia says you need the most qualified, not a local guy. Yeah, I agree. You should hire the most qualified person, and I just don't see a world where that is actually Joe Dumars, even if that's what they kind of be. Kenny says Zion should be in the conversation with SGA, Anthony Edwards, Tatum, Luka type of superstar. Zion has the potential. He has, but he has not lived up to it, and a lot of that is on Zion. And is this the year it finally changes? Does it not? When do you kind of just call it? And I think that's the big question facing the Pelicans right now. Michael Morgan says, Willie Green is a horrible coach. Even last year, 0-27 when trailing going into the fourth quarter. I don't know if it was 0-27, but something like that. Ingram even said they were winning off of talent. I mean, yeah, look, you win off of talent. You don't win off of system in the NBA. Like, you can point to Heat culture, but that's not a system. They've changed their offense. They've done things to kind of work around their players. And even then, they've been a play-in tournament team the past couple of years. So it's not system. It is talent. That's what you need. The problem is the Pelicans' talent hasn't played. We didn't get 1 minute of DeJounte Murray, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson together, and that's just unbelievable to me. D-Max says, Griff's real problem, a pro basketball team is not a family, and compassion and mindfulness are not the key attributes you want in a pro sports team. Get that crap off the gym walls pronto. I mean, I think kind of preaching the culture stuff is not bad, of trying to create an atmosphere that you want. Like, that's a good thing, right? Culture is how you do things, your mental approach to it, and how you interact with one another. And I think those are important things to really keep in mind. But it goes to ownership shouldn't want to keep Willie Green just because he's a nice guy, right? Like, that's not what you want here. Jeremiah Blackwell Jr. says, why is this team so mismanaged? I mean, I don't think it's necessarily been mismanaged. Just stuff hasn't worked out. That doesn't mean mismanagement, right? Like, this wasn't like you drafted Darko Milicic over Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade, or Chris Bosh, right? So that's where I think you look at it of, you need some luck, and the luck just hasn't been on the Pelicans side. You can flip a coin. This is the analogy I've been using like 50 times in a row, and it can come up heads every time. It's unlikely, but it can happen. And that's kind of what's been occurring to the Pelicans. They're just getting the wrong end of the coin, the stick, whatever word you want to use, repeatedly, because there's a timeline, right? A universe here where Zion Williamson plays all these games and David Griffin probably has multiple Executives of the Year awards, and the Pelicans have been in the playoffs every year and looked good, right? Like, the issues have been more injuries than anything else, but the front office, David Griffin, goes into why those injuries have happened too. And that's been part of the problem here when it comes to all of it. Hot Takes 77, maybe Willie Green will be unencumbered now. David Griffin could have had his fingers in some things, blames on Willie Green. I mean, no, right? Like, you've seen it kind of come out that he wasn't doing that. Willie Green was playing some of these veteran guys over younger guys. Was there ever a world where you think David Griffin wanted Willie Green to play Tony Snell over Trey Murphy? That almost cost them that play-in tournament game against the Clippers a number of years ago when they went on to face the Suns in the first round. There have been some questionable decisions that I guarantee you David Griffin has not been like, I want this. And it's been a Willie Green thing. And again, you've got to give your coach some autonomy. So I like that approach to it. But yeah, that's kind of led to some problems here. Bowie says, every day you're here. Thank you for listening. Love that. Jose Hasburn says, could they be waiting for the next guy that comes in to make the decision on head coach Willie Green? That's what they should be doing. That's what they absolutely should be doing. I'm not sure that's actually what they're doing, but in theory, that is the right thing to do. Yes, I agree with you there. Skullful Shack says, well, I thought we'd never see the day. LOL. Griffin had a lot of good picks, just never healthy ever. Yeah, he is a victim of Zion and these injuries, as much as he's a victim of the mistakes that he's made too, when it comes to all of that. D-Max says, Zion, if you get flagged, look to trade Zion. If not, need a Godfather deal. Is any team really going to make that big of an offer for Zion Williamson this offseason? No, I don't think so. I think some teams will take a chance on him, but I don't think you're going to get like an Anthony Davis type of return for him, or even a Drew Holiday type of return from him because of everything here. JPZL says, I'm optimistic as any other Pels fan, but the rumors I've heard since Griff was fired has been disappointing to say the least. Yeah. We'll talk more about those tomorrow. You're not going to want to miss tomorrow's episode. So Wednesday's episode of Locked On Pelicans here. Michael Morgan says, if you trade Zion, this team is a lottery team. Yep. And maybe that's the plan. You can go through a rebuild by trading him and being bad, but you've got to make sure that that's the plan and you're going to stick through it, and that you have a plan to get out of there. Might not work, but at least have a plan and try and stick through the plan with everything. So I think that's an important thing to kind of look at all of this. D-Max says, by the way, disagree on Griff in drafting. Hayes top 10, trading back out of Garland, Kyra Lewis over Maxey. Some of those picks in the time don't look bad, right? Like, no one knew Maxey was going to be this good. I was actually pretty high on Maxey, but no one thought he was going to be this good. He went in the 20s for a reason, right? You know, I think Jackson Hayes at the time was the right pick because he is the type of big that should fit really well next to Zion Williamson. And that has more to do with Jackson Hayes than anything else, right? Like, that was the guy who just wanted to post on social media that he was an NBA player when it comes to everything. Nola G says, Mr. Every Datter, love it. Let's go, Jake. I appreciate y'all tuning in and everything here. We're going to start to wrap up the show because I got the radio spot coming up here, but we're going to keep going through your questions and all of this here. And I'm going to keep trying to fly through some of this. More questions and stuff than I thought. So that's kind of cool here. And I'm going to skip ahead. So if I miss something and I skipped it, kind of throw it back in there again. Jose Hasbert says the team has a chance to make a turnaround with the right GM pick here. With the correct pick, yeah, they could. Of course you could, right? It's going to be a tough job, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, I'd say. There can be a vision here that kind of gets you through all of this stuff. Kevin Hall says that's really good. Clean the house. Yeah, but be careful what you wish for with some of that too, right? If it's Joe Dumars or someone else, depending on how you feel around him, that's going to be the kind of thing. Michael Morgan says if you trade Zion, it's a rebuild and CJ will want out plus Trey. It's not that Trey will want out. Look, CJ's not a long-term piece here. With Trey, it's just you're gonna screw up your timelines. I'm gonna do a whole show on this probably later in the week of you look at some teams trying to do 2 timelines. The Warriors are kind of famous for it, but you've even seen a little bit of an issue with that with the Memphis Grizzlies and the Denver Nuggets, particularly the Denver Nuggets, knowing that they're kind of in salary cap hell and need to kind of figure out what to do to be a sustainable winner. And it means playing some of those young guys and trying to do 2 timelines. It's just not easy to do that. It's really not easy to do that. So you can say, we're going to build around Trey and we're going to be competitive, but not if you're actually rebuilding. That's part of the problem, right? So eventually you just, cool. By the time you're going to be good, Trey's at the back end of his extension and that does you no good. And you've kind of wasted a valuable asset there. And in a small market, it does somewhat become about asset management for better or worse. The best time to trade these guys is in the first year of their extension. If you're going to rebuild, it means you should probably trade Herb before you have to give him a bigger deal, because can you pay Herb Jones, as much as I love him, $30 million a year? I don't know that you can. And Trey, you're going to lose value by the year on that. So if he's not going to be the guy that leads you to a title because you're going younger, and he's young, don't get me wrong, but you're going to end up having to pay him $60 million a year. That's what contracts are going to look like. Is that something that you can do? And I don't really know. So that's kind of the problem when it comes to this sort of thing. So I don't know. There you go with it, right? A rebuild is going to be rough, and it's not going to look the way y'all think. And it, to me, would be a 4 or 5 year process, which is why maybe the team won't do it. But if you trade Zion, you're rebuilding, and if you try and push for the play-in tournament next year or something like that, it's just really dumb and only going to hurt your draft position. So have a vision. And you need to go out and execute it and not try and play both sides of it, which is something that I'm worried the Pelicans are going to be trying to do. Fresh Co 504 says the next GM should make the decision on Willie Green again. Should make the decision on Willie Green, but we'll see. I don't think that's going to be the case, kind of based on what we're hearing right now when it comes to it, and that's not what you want here. BP says, not sure we should give up on Z as he's entering his prime. No, it's so much talent there that I get it, but he's not playing. That's a big part of the problem. And so, to quote Mike Detillier, who I'm going to be on in a couple of minutes here on WWL radio, the best ability is availability. And he's not been available. And the reason he's not been available, at least part of it is just bad luck. Injuries happen. A lot of that's on him too, not taking care of his body, not being the type of player that he needs to be. And yeah, that's kind of a big part of the problem here. A couple more questions. Let me see. Oh, this is a good one. Fall damage. At what point does the medical and training staff finally take their part of the blame? Look, they took the blame. Everyone got fired from that team, right? The player performance and care team is its official title. And that was the, I'm blanking on the names of everybody, but that was Aaron Nelson is the name I'm thinking of, right? They let him go. They basically fired him and made that change, and then the team was healthy the next year. So they have done some of that and tried to kind of do that, and then these injuries have still remained, right? They got significantly worse this season after a year ago being good. So is last year what it truthfully is, or is this year? Which one's the outlier, right? We actually don't have an answer to that question right now. But they did what they could to try and say like they need to, they made the changes they needed to make and it looked like it worked. And then this year the wheels fell off again. And that's just unfortunate if that's going to be, the case when it comes to the team here and all of this. So yeah, that's kind of where it goes. That is what I come to by saying you need some luck, and the Pelicans just have not gotten the luck that they have needed for this franchise. Maybe you get it when you get that little bit of luck that you need in the beginning of a period, it will sustain you and carry you and massively change your franchise. That's what the luck can do. So let's wrap it up there. I think that's a good way to kind of end the show with all of this. So more to come. You're going to want to watch Tuesday night, Wednesday morning show on Joe Dumars and ownership. And I'm going to give you some really interesting insight into that and why I am concerned over all of this stuff. So a lot more to come this week. Probably multiple bonus shows, things like that here on Locked On Pelicans. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Let me get ready for this radio spot. Go turn on WWL Radio, 870 AM here to hear me talk some more. Even try and call in. Might be able to answer your question live on air, which would be kind of fun here. Gary Solomon Jr., every day are here. Love it. Thank you. Appreciate you all so much for tuning in, for making Locked On Pelicans part of your day or just tuning in for the first time. If you like the show, this is your first time listening, subscribe, listen to the next show. If you listen to one show a week, listen to 2 or 3. We're here Monday through Friday. We will be making sense of everything going on here. Appreciate y'all so much. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at Nola Jake on Twitter. This is the second outro here, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.